So we're here after a rich conversation with a group of leading conveners and process artists and learning journey crafters and alternative finance gurus, explorers, um, sharing a little bit of what we're taking from this conversation and what might have value both to the broader set of participants in the deep dive and the wider world that might someday actually listen in as well. Michael, I think you were going to lead us off.
Well, it was just that very last sentence that you mentioned there, which was what was I was chewing over in the last minute, was that wider audience. Because, you know, I come to these deep dives, or I come to these types of conversations, I always get something from them, I always make connections, but it tends to be with folk that are already in the mix, already doing stuff, and we get value, and I get value because, you know, already with two people, Michelle and Kevin, I can already continue bilateral conversations. But I want to be having more people who are not in the mix and not on the journey already into this space. And so I suppose I ponder how one can do that, you know, beyond, say, for example, the NESI Forum was one way to bring people in, but on the virtual space, how to get some serious mass participation. I mean, Citizens is our effort at the moment to try and do that, but how to ramp it up and get those not in the space in is what I'm really thinking, and I know that's almost aping Kevin's sort of reflection earlier on today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for making the time to join us.
No worries. So I will say thank you and thanks to all. I'll continue conversations. Michelle, I'll reach out to you, and Kevin, we're already emailing. But Ben, we'll speak soon. Philippe, it's been a pleasure. Maria, we'll speak whenever those when we need to on those NESI notes. So thanks very much, folks, and I'll say cheerio.
Cheers.
May I continue because I need to get in the tube?
Yeah, please.
So, and I would like to build on to Michael was saying, because this is the tricky thing. We tend to gather ourselves, but it's very difficult for us to reach outside, and it's very difficult for people to try and make sense in. So maybe this is the question: how can we help in a very short of time mainstream? And we are part of mainstream for many things as well, which is something I don't think we can lose sight of. Mm-hmm. For the real value of different things. So if we focus on investment, what could help us see all the different kinds of values which we are blind to because of our upbringing and social constructions? That's what I'm taking away from the call, and trying to think about ways to bring that into, the more general spaces we find ourselves in. So basically, what is the return on investment, or on which area should we be looking for return on investment, and what does it mean? So we can do a different kind of accounting, if you want, or valuing.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Did you want to chime in, Kevin?
I just thought that was a good idea, well stated.
I also like it very much. I think we should look how to invest in values and not in value, and also understand that we are investors, and understand that it's not us and them, it's not the mainstream and us, it's we're all connected. We are connected with nature, we're connected with each other, and we are part of the problem. And I think if we make small steps first and really build the trust in between us, and I think today it was again a very important moment for that, and seeing each other and recognizing of what each one of us is doing, is bringing us further. And I also have a very good optimism that we can still make it all together in which forms the future will show. But
And but this is great. Thank you. Keep me in the loop. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is keep me in the loop. Thank you.
I think he had to drop off. Oh well. Were you complete, Philippe? Yeah.
Okay, so I think I might be next. So reflections, I think I tend to be optimistic, and I'm conscious of that. But I think that the nuance and subtlety that you were suggesting, Ben, is really an important place to be listening for, and really appreciate that. And then in terms of reaching out to mainstream or finding our way to make connections along that edge, I want to reflect a little bit on the idea of language. Woody Tash with Slow Money felt that we needed to develop a new language, and there's a lot of work being done around the language of complexity. And I just think that language may be one of the ways that we can develop bridges and help introduce these ideas and amplify them if we're conscious of that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know that in framing this dialogue, I defaulted to language that really does kind of work within the bubble of people who've been focused on paradigm shifting, transformational frameworks for a long time, and kind of set up in some ways what I think you were naming as a false us versus them. There's the mainstream out there that doesn't get this, and there's us who've been looking at these things systemically and looking at the consciousness dimensions, etc., seeing how it's all interconnected, we're all interdependent, and we get it and they don't. And to some extent that's true, but it also needs to not be true if things are actually transforming. And I think that's part of maybe the possibility I was naming before, that it's both, and that you hinted at too, that it's both that there's much more transformational consciousness out there in the mainstream than is visible, and that there's much more mainstream consciousness in us and in our organizations and our approaches than we'd care to admit, or old paradigm maybe is a better term than mainstream. So this whole notion of a mainstream is somewhat illusory. And certainly if you think about, there's massive cohorts on this planet for whom that what I'm referring to as mainstream isn't their mainstream. They're on the other end of an oppressive, extractivist, exploitative system, and have been, for hundreds of years in many cases. So they've been dealing with these questions of how to survive and stay in integrity in the context of mainstream insanity in fundamental ways for quite a while. I think one of the things I'm taking away, though, in terms of this question of how we do amplify this, the message that we are carrying, to the extent we are in some kind of a valid bubble, or we're a tribe or a cohort that's been seeing things for a while and has a lot to offer, the question of how does that message, become part of the wider dialogue, and the actions that we want to take get that level of support that other more mainstream things do. I come back to what you named, Michelle, about going to where the trust, the social capital already exists, and working within those contexts, rather than trying to pull. Sure, we have our own campaigns and our own initiatives, and we want to pull energy into those. That's a natural thing, and I'm not saying that isn't worth doing. And to the extent that's already in existence out in the world in different ways, how do we show up in service to what's in motion and support the integrity of those existing relationships and the work that's coming out of them, and help that to be the vehicle through which transformation happens. That's the model that I think.
May I add something there? It just popped out from what you're saying and Michelle was saying. I think we are always trying to express the new narrative in our terms, in our language, in our experience, in our consciousness. And I think it's might be interesting. Let young people tell about a new reality that they can learn with us, That, let not us tell the story or a message, that really like invite people that might not have this a certain perception of or certain realities, and let's learn together with them how they express the language or the message, and this would be interesting as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much sort of top-down new narrative energy out there. It's an oxymoron, right, Michelle?
I love that. That's priceless.
Another thing that Michael sort of named, and we didn't talk about it a lot, is this, like he was saying, maybe it's too late, this question of, part of the new narrative frameworks that I've supported over the last 10 years, it's always that, we can make it. We're going to make it, or we have a chance to make it. We don't have a lot of time. We have this narrow window, but we have all the solutions and the answers available to us, and we just need the collective will and more collaboration. And I think that's part of the story that so often rings hollow, and it certainly leaves out whole cohorts of people that are feeling a lot of despair, and other sets of possibilities, like that go directly to the local scale. So maybe we don't all make it. Maybe there's some form of collapse that's already underway, if not around the corner. It sure seems like that. And we're Meg Wheatley has this term, creating islands of sanity, and it's not clear to me that focusing on that isn't exactly the same stuff we do anyway if we thought that it was it was continents of sanity, and or the whole Gaia transforming or regenerating. We'd still be working in the same ways at the same scales ultimately to create change. So maybe we don't need to have the conversation about whether we're going to make it or not, but I do feel I've become a little bit allergic to spaces where the assumption is we can make it and we're going to, or if we do these things, then we will, as opposed to a more open kind of a framework in terms of what the future might hold that isn't dependent on the story of it all working out, and that being what we have to work towards, and makes room for grief and despair and even cynicism, maybe. Although I don't like cynicism.
I think that's really beautiful, and I think that's really important, and I think it acknowledges the complexity. And I think that out of that grief and despair, we may find new depths and new places that we hadn't even imagined. So, I mean, I think it's really important to hold that space as well.
Thank you. Maria, do you want to explain what's in the chat here? You're muted, though, if you're trying to talk. It's late. Yeah. Resilience on the way. We need resilience is a worthwhile goal, I guess, is what you're saying, whether we're on the way up or on the way down, or on the way through or going off a cliff. There's one of my favorite podcasts is called Crazy Town. It's a Post Carbon Institute put out a season of this, and the idea is that it feels like you're living in Crazy Town if you're awake to all these multiple crises and the threats that we face. And then you see business as usual around you, like none of this is happening. And one of the metaphors they use a lot is from the Roadrunner cartoon. There's Wile E. Coyote. He's always running off the edge of a cliff, but he keeps running. He's like up in the air, and it's only when he looks down that he falls. So we're like Wile E. Coyote guzzling gasoline.
But we can run faster still. I'm pretty sure.
All right. Maybe this is a wrap. Thank you all. We're down to 3. It's been It's been a great edition of the Deep Dive.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben, for your work, but also thank you for everybody. But really, thank you very much, Ben, for holding the space and making it happen.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome.